you find the area of a parallelogram the same way that you find the area of a rectangle. You're going to use the exact same formula, which is area equals base times height. Now what I want to do before we get into this formula is show you how I know that formula is correct. So first I want you to do is imagine this parallelogram right here. And what I want to do is I want you to imagine me cutting it out. Okay, so now I'm left with this parallelogram right here without any extra paper on it. Now, one thing we know if we were going to use this formula base times height is that I need a height. And the definition of a height is that it's the perpendicular line between the two bases. So if this is my base down here, the height has to make a right angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a height into this shape. And you can see the height right here. I drew it with this dotted line. So the first thing I want to do is figure out, okay, how high is this parallelogram? So if I were going to count up these spaces, I can see that this parallelogram has a height of 5. Okay. Now if I want to know how wide this parallelogram is, what its base is, again, I'm going to count the squares that I have going across. Now this last one I'm going to label as 8, and you might be thinking, well, that's not a full square. And you're right, it's not a full square, but right now all I'm looking for is the distance, how long it is. Okay. And so from here to here, if I were going to count it up, it would be 8 full units, okay, even though this isn't a full square. So if we look at this, I can see that this parallelogram has a base of 8 and a height of 5. Now you still might be wondering, well, how can we use this rectangle formula for this parallelogram? Well, here's what I want you to imagine. Imagine I took a pair of scissors right here and I cut this height. So I'm going to separate it, cut this side right off. If I were to take this piece and slide it over here, you can see that I've created a rectangle. Okay? This extra piece fits exactly on the other side to create a rectangle. And now, remember how I said don't worry about this being a piece of a square? Look, right now, this shape right here is a full square. Okay? So now, if I wanted you to find the area of this rectangle, you know it's base times height, and all you would do is you would plug in your measurement for your base, which is 8, your measurement for your height, which is 5, and when you multiply those together, you get 40. And since I didn't give you any units, we'll just say 40 square units. So every parallelogram is essentially a rectangle, and you could make it into a rectangle by kind of cutting it and moving it around, and that's why we can use the same formula. So let's try another example here. Okay, so I'm going to start with my formula. This FSA is how we like to show our work. We call it a 4-point answer. We have a formula, a substitution, and then an answer with a label. So even though it's only 3 steps, it's going to be worth 4 points. So the first thing I start off with is my formula. And we said that the formula for the area of a parallelogram is base times height. The next thing I want to do is do my substitutions. This measurement down here is my base. So I'm going to plug 3.7 in here for my base. And then my height is this measurement right here, 7.5. Remember, the height and the base will form a right angle. So we're not going to be using any measurements. Sometimes they'll give you measurements, like they might label this side 9.3. That's just to distract you. Okay? The slanted sides are not going to be used in these formulas because our base and our height have to make a right angle. So if they give you an extra measurement like that, just ignore it. Okay? So 3.7 times 7.5. I can use my calculator to help me figure out this answer. Okay, I still have to show my substitutions, but from here, I'm allowed to just plug 3.7 times 7.5 into my calculator, and I get my answer. My answer says 27.75. Now, normally I would just label this, but I know that if I read my directions carefully, I'll notice up here it says round to the nearest tenth. So 27.75 needs to be rounded. So I'm going to round to the nearest tenth, which means this 5 will determine what happens in my tenth spot. So this is really going to be 27 and 8 tenths. That's how I would round this. And then I need a label, which would be feet squared. Okay, let's try one more. Slide my calculator out of the way here. We'll start off, remember, always with our formula, area equals base times height. Next I'm going to do a substitution. So my measurement for my base is 5.1. My measurement for my height is 2. At this point, I'm allowed to use my calculator. So I'm going to come over here, bring my calculator back up. I'm going to do 5.1 times 2, and I get an answer of 10.2. So my area is 10.2. Now, 10.2, if it says to round to the nearest tenth, 10.2 is already to the nearest tenth, so I don't have to round it at all. So I just need to remember my label, because the label is the last part of my 4-point answer. Remember, 1 point for formula, 1 for substitution, 1 for the answer, 1 for the label. And when I get to that point, I'm finished.